It's the 14th of July and number of the day is a massive 100,000 jobs at VW. Volkswagen are going to be cut worldwide, Francis heard, and that's potentially going to have an impact on VW SA.
Yeah, because VW is very important to our automotive industry. So 100,000 jobs worldwide. It's a big number, and it shows that China is winning the race now when it comes to car manufacturing. European manufacturers are suffering because China has just become this global exporter. It's just churning out cars, and they're going around the world cheaply, and people are buying them, and they're no longer buying VWs like they used to. So bringing it home to South Africa, we spoke to VW South Africa, and they're not commenting on what they say is speculation from the head office in Germany about how many jobs will be lost. But it must be unsettling for the 3,500 to 4,000 people who work at VW in Nelson Mandela Bay. And really, VW is the lifeblood of Nelson Mandela Bay, which is the lifeblood of our automotive industry in South Africa. I can give you some stats, but it's big for that municipality and the people who live in it.
Because I was reading somewhere, and tell me if I'm on the right track here, that 40% of those who are working in Nelson Mandela Bay actually work in the automotive sector. I'm not saying VW specifically, but it's a lot of people in Nelson Mandela Bay that rely on the automotive sector.
It is a lot of people. So 40%, you're right. I could give you some more stats. The VW, Isuzu, Mercedes-Benz, they're all in the Eastern Cape. They represent nearly 40% of all our manufacturing and over 50% of exports. VW is the biggest vehicle manufacturer. So you've got those three, but VW is the biggest. And what's worrying is that we have these manufacturers here. So the car industry is interesting because we're importing cars and we're exporting cars. And these manufacturers around the world have been divvying up where they make certain models. So VW makes the Polo Vivo and the Polo here. By the way, it announced its 1 millionth Polo earlier this year. It's made 1 million Polos in South Africa. But then these car manufacturers export some of the vehicles, and remember that the AGOA was very attractive because they can export to America with no tariffs from here, so that helped to attract car makers here. We gave them subsidies, and then some is for the local market as well. So Polos are popular, but now the industry share of those local manufacturers, the European manufacturers based in South Africa, is going down because South Africans are also buying Chinese cars. So earlier this year, 1 in 3 cars in South Africa sold locally was manufactured here.
Right. 1
in 3. Before that, it was more than 1 in 2. So we used to buy a lot of these cars here. And yeah, this is just a jobs machine. It's important for the economy. And hopefully VW South Africa is not severely impacted, but I fear it will be.
And it could very well have this sort of knock-on effect. And whenever you start seeing large-scale potential job losses like this, you look at a juggernaut that is VW, it comes down to the bottom line. And then you got to then go back to 2023. Listen to the kind of profits that VW, this is in 2023, we're pulling in operating profit of 22.6 billion euros. That's 2023. Then in 2024, that dropped to 19.1 billion euros. So a bit of a haircut, but still manageable. But then last year, this would have been 2025. Listen to this. It dropped to 8.9 billion euros. It's almost a third in 3 years. And that is a difficult conversation with any CFO to have.
It is. So now it's a shrinking pie, right? Unless you're a Chinese manufacturer, then you've got a growing pie. But for everybody else, it's a shrinking pie. And then how much of that pie does South Africa get? And it's really interesting that in February, VW South Africa said that this year would be a make or break. for the company, and it was announcing plans to possibly make a new pickup truck in South Africa. But it mentioned local issues. And I just want to read you something from the Nelson Mandela Bay Business Chamber, which of course is concerned about automotive manufacturing. Earlier, the CEO was saying there's still problems, there are barriers, infrastructure, reliability of electricity. And now electricity is more reliable, but we know that the costs are just hurting manufacturers. Isuzu and others have spoken out about that. Water supply, logistical inefficiencies, critical skill shortages, red tape bottlenecks, and a lack of coordinated investor-friendly policy environment. Essentially saying if government doesn't wake up, we will lose the car manufacturers that are already here anyway, because they're facing pressure from China, and then they're facing issues here in South Africa, which many would argue are fixable for South Africa.
Are fixable for South Africa, but you mentioned the tariffs earlier for the US, and obviously with AGOA we had a pretty decent seating there, but I saw over in the US the sales dropping by 7%, sales to the US and sales within the US as well, because of the tariffs on car imports introduced by the Trump administration. So you've got to bring all of this together. It's not just because of the Chinese cars. I know that many of the motoring sector say, oh, it's about the Chinese cars, it's the Chinese cars. Yes, but it's not the only factor involved here. Very much the Trump tariffs having an impact on their numbers.
Indeed. So it's a tough market out there for car makers. We have attracted many of the big global car makers here, but VW, one of them, at a global level, we're not sure of the South African impact, but at a global level, announcing plans to cut 100,000 jobs worldwide.